It's been sold as an early Christmas present to house builders, councils and the electorate. But this is an industry that can't be rushed.
On this scheme alone, there's 2,500.
How long does it take to get something like this off the ground?
A decade or so.
To speed this up, the Housing Secretary said today councils that delay or deny developments for no good reason can be stripped of their planning powers, but reassured them they'd still be able to block building if it would significantly alter the character of an area or impinge on the greenbelt. Michael Gove is walking a tightrope developers think looks wobbly.
There are lots of councils where there's a positive story to be told, like there is here. There are also lots of councils where there is a very negative story to be told, where local councillors have been elected on an anti-development ticket and have no interest in seeing housing schemes delivered.
Well, won't all that change now?
No, I think that will just increase. And there'll be more councils who push back and just decide, you know what, we're going to reduce our housing numbers. We're not going to deliver the homes that we've said previously we need to, and we're quite happy with that situation.
Michael Gove is adamant that his changes will boost building, but for authorities that don't, a warning.
I'm issuing a direction to 7 of the worst authorities in terms of plan making, who have failed not just to adopt a plan, but even to submit one to examination since 2004. St Albans, Amber Valley, Ashfield, Medway, Uttlesford, Basildon and Castle Point will all need to provide me with a plan timetable within 12 weeks. Should they fail, I will consider further intervention to ensure that a plan is put in place.
Strong and somewhat surprising words, says the Liberal Democrat council leader in St Albans.
The fact that we were talking to the planning inspectors yesterday who seemed content with what we were doing, the fact that we've been talking to the department for months, if not years, about the progress we're making, does make it rather surprising that we should be picked off. It's almost as if the Secretary of State is playing party politics.
This is one site in St Albans that has been trapped in planning purgatory.
The greenbelt around St Albans is one of the assets of St Albans.
Here, today's announcements have been welcomed, tentatively.
St Albans have been subject to a number of what we feel are very bad planning decisions that then set a precedent to release more and more greenbelt. And we want that to stop. We, as local residents, have felt the pressure of bad decisions on other sides of the city, and we need to see a very, very strong and robust set of planning framework and policy that's delivered.
Housing, or the failure to create enough housing, is likely to be a key issue at the general election. Michael Gove has recommitted to the Conservative target of building 300,000 homes a year. A manifesto pledge no less, which he says they couldn't meet because of economic factors such as high inflation and high interest rates. The only fly in the ointment for Michael Gove and the Conservative is, though, that many house builders say that today's announcement is likely to lead to fewer houses, not more, being built.
The route, they say, compulsory local targets removed by central government last year.
Over the course of the last year, 60 local planning authorities actually downed tools in terms of setting plans for the future, because what they heard was a message from this government, which was to say you don't have to build the homes in your area that the people need. And there was a lot of what was said today will reinforce that point even further.
There is one other challenge developers worry has not been addressed.
We've seen over the last sort of decade a consistent gradual decrease in the number of planning officers in local planning authorities.
Has it actually made that bigger impact, though?
Yeah, because it delays everything. So a scheme that should take 8 weeks to determine ends up taking 3 or 4 months.
The government say today is about building, not buckling to pressure from the NIMBYs, the not in my backyard campaigners and MPs. Many desperate for affordable homes say, who cares for the reason? They just want results.
Well, with me now is Roger Mortlock, who leads the countryside charity, the CPRE, formerly the Campaign for the Protection of Rural England, and Emma Revel, who specialises in housing matters for the right-leaning think tank, the Centre for Policy Studies. Welcome to you both. So, Emma, let's start with you. Do you agree with Paul McNamara's assessment that actually this means fewer houses will be built than more?
I think, unfortunately, a lack of binding targets does mean fewer houses, because councils think, well, if I'm not going to be held accountable for these targets and I don't have specific numbers that I have to build in my area, unfortunately, what history shows us, very recent history, is that councils simply won't build those houses.
It's the power of local government to decide on behalf of their residents, isn't it?
Well, unfortunately, they're not taking the views of all residents into account. Not only are they not taking into account the less vocal residents who are suffering as a result of the housing crisis, but they're also not reflecting potential residents who could move in were the houses available.
Roger, unless this is directed by central government and they have a big plan and they know what the numbers actually are, you're never going to solve the housing crisis.
I think it's worth facing into what this crisis is about. It's really a crisis of genuinely affordable and social rent homes. The only time we've built 350,000 houses a year since the war is when the government built half of them. If we're going to have a target at all, perhaps let's have a target for social rent and social housing. But we don't need those. What we know is that that overall target has led to a strangulation of local plans not coming forward and speculative development that's been wreaking havoc on our countryside.
Emma?
Well, I mean, we haven't. The government says that they're going to be on track to build their 300,000 homes a year target for next year. They haven't met that for any of the last 5 years, so I don't know why they're quite so optimistic about next year. And actually, if you take into effect the net migration figures that we've seen in the last year or two, 300,000 isn't enough anyway. We need to be building more like 500,000 homes a year. Because we're not taking into account the scale of migration, so we're not building enough for the people who are coming, never mind the people who live here already.
Roger, there has to be a solution, hasn't there? I mean, the demand is simply much greater than the supply. It's got to be built somewhere, and it can't all be done on brownfield sites.
Yeah, but a big chunk of it can be built on brownfield sites. We did a report last year that estimated 1.2 shovel-ready million homes could be built on shovel-ready sites, and almost double that could be built on sites with challenges, that money could solve. So I do think brownfield first. Like, why build on the countryside when you can build on brownfield first?
That's the nub of the issue, isn't it? That basically, that's what it's about. It's about protecting the environment, protecting our green spaces, or shoving more people into cities.
Well, it's not just about cities. We have brownfield in towns and villages as well, just not the same amount of it. But I think there are two things to focus on. One is that we simply don't have enough brownfield that is ready in the right places. A lot of it, you don't know who owns it. It can be put better use for industrial use. And also a lot of our green belt isn't green. It's things like car parks or railways and train stations. And we should be honest about the green belt, protect the truly green environment. No one really disputes that. But what isn't truly green could be built on.
Roger.
Just on targets, you're going to have a target. Let's have a target for brownfield. The only time we've really seen high levels of brownfield sites come forward is when we had a target for brownfield. And on the green belt, if we're facing a climate and an ecological emergency, we're asking our land to work hard. If we didn't have the green belt, we'd be wanting to event it now so that we could create air quality and natural solutions that protect our cities.
Surely, if you build on the green belt, you're completely out of sync with the requirements of our environmental politics.
What we require as a country is a solution to the housing crisis, because you have hundreds of thousands of people all across the country, towns, cities, villages, who are living in unsuitable accommodation, temporary accommodation, overcrowded accommodation. We need to fix housing everywhere.
What about the Cambridge example? A huge plan for more housing in Cambridge, and then, one side is saying you can't do that because there's simply not enough infrastructure, not enough water. That's a fair point, isn't it? What's the point of building there if you can't then supply essential needs?
Well, I think we should build a new reservoir in Cambridge as well. I don't think it's one or the other.
Is it that as easily done as said?
I think the fact that we haven't built a new reservoir in I think over 20 years, given that the population of England has skyrocketed in that time, we need to build reservoirs as well. Of course, we need to build things that meet the population's needs, whether that's more GPs, schools, roads, etc. But we need to build the housing as well.
Look, we still plan in boxes. We think about housing in one box, we think about water in another box, we think about roads and other infrastructure and nature and climate in other boxes. We need an integrated spatial framework so we can make the decisions that matter about where the right thing for the right place goes.
It strikes me as that we're not being honest about the numbers. We're not being honest about the degree of local government deciding what they need, what they want for their people that they need to protect, and what central government needs to plan. Surely there is a secret saucer that lies somewhere in between both your positions. Emma.
Yes, quite probably. I think we need to build on Greenbelt as well as Brown. We need to build in towns and cities as well as villages. There isn't, one silver bullet that fixes the housing crisis.
OK, we'll leave it with those bullets. Emma Revel, Roger Matlock, thank you very much indeed.